Hey there, it's Jenny B from vitalitybyjenny.com, and today I wanted to talk about something a little bit different, and that is home birth versus having a hospital birth. And I wanted to talk about this because I feel like as women it's a very important decision that we kind of don't realize how important it is. Because in our society, it's just so normal to go to the hospital to have our babies that we don't really even think that there's other options. And so I just kind of wanted to, put a little bug out there just in case there's anyone listening who might be interested. So I wanted to start by first going over my experience, because I have two boys, and my first son was born at a hospital and my second son was born at home. And so I have, I have the experience of actually going through both of them and, being able to determine for myself after that what the pros and cons were for each, and, being able to share that with you. Okay, so first, I was going to talk about my first birth, which was at the hospital, and this was with Jaden, who's now 4 years old. So I was at over 40 weeks along, as far as they could tell, and so my doctor was saying that we should, that we could induce, and that we should pick a date and that sort of thing, so that we could kind of plan around it. And this, at the time, sounded normal and like a good idea to me, because my mother-in-law was coming into town, and she was only going to be able to be there for a short amount of time. And so we were kind of, hoping that it would happen during the time that she was there. And so when our doctor suggested that we plan it, that kind of, pushed us more towards saying yes to that, because we wanted to have our son whenever she was there. So we decided eventually, after we waited for a minute, but the baby still wasn't coming, and he still wasn't coming, and so we were anxious, so we decided to go ahead and get induced. And so I went in the night before, the morning they were going to induce me. So the night before, they give you something to soften your cervix, and it's not supposed to give you contractions. And then in the morning, they'll give you the medicine that gives you contractions, and then you'll have the baby that day. So they gave me the medicine to soften my cervix, and they said, oh, you're just going to go to sleep. Well, that ended up giving me contractions, and I started having contractions every 2 minutes throughout the entire night. And they would come in and check on me every now and then, but they really just wanted me to sleep, because they thought that the real birth wasn't going to happen until the next day. So they kept urging me to just try to relax and go to sleep and all of this stuff, and they kept pushing for me to take some, what are they called, sleeping pills. There we go. And I had never taken sleeping pills in my life. Still at that point, I just didn't really, take medicine that often, even though I wasn't really into health the way that I am now. I didn't know all the things that I know now, but I still didn't take medicine very often, and so I had never taken sleeping pills. But eventually, with so many times them coming in suggesting that I take sleeping pills, I finally said, okay, I'll try it. So I took some sleeping pills, and I ended up hallucinating until I would have a contraction. So I'd hallucinate for 2 minutes, and then I'd have a contraction, and then I'd start hallucinating again, and each contraction would kind of bring me out of the hallucination. So that went on until the morning time, and then the sleeping medicine finally started to wear off, and I felt a little bit more normal, but I was still having these contractions. And so they came in to check if I had dilated at all, and it was nothing. I think it was a 2. So, and that continued on until about noon that next day, with the contractions and not having any dilation happen at all. And when you are in a situation where your body has been through so much, you've been through so much mentally, and nothing, you don't have really anything to show for that, that is incredibly devastating. And so I just broke down at that point, and as the contractions got harder and harder, I just eventually said that I just couldn't do it anymore. And so I ended up taking an epidural, and then from then on, everything, of course, was much easier for me physically. But then the thing that was really upsetting for me after I had had the epidural was that I couldn't control my body, and I didn't realize that it would do that as to the extent that it did, I guess. I knew it would kill the pain, but I couldn't move my body on my own. So at some point, there would be a position that I would get in, I guess, that would cut off my baby's heartbeat. It would start to drop a lot. So it was cutting off the blood supply or the oxygen to him at some point. And it would be terrifying because you would hear this happen, and you would have to wait for the nurses to get there to move you because you couldn't move yourself. And that was just some terrible moments for sure. But then, he ended up coming, and it was, an amazing moment when he came, and then they take him away and, you have to sit there, lay there while you watch your baby from across the room screaming and crying their first moments of their lives. And, I didn't even know everything that they were doing over there. My husband was over there with them, but I had no idea what they were doing. I had torn during the delivery, so I was getting sewn up. And so that was also another very hard moment at the hospital birth was, you had just delivered and you get to see him. Like they laid him on my tummy and I got to see him, and that was magical, but then it's just whisked right away, and so that was hard. But then, they brought him over and I got to nurse and be with him, and so that was the end of the hospital birth, pretty much. So then for my home birth, I had a midwife who I had been seeing throughout my pregnancy, and she, because I decided that I wanted to have a tub, and so a tub is just, they bring over kind of like an indoor pool kind of looking thing. It's just a big tub that they fill up with really warm water, and so it helps cut the pain whenever you are in labor. So they brought over the tub, and they had some troubles getting that set up, but then, that eventually was set up. So I, started into labor, and that progressively, it starts off slow and then progresses as you go along. So it progressed throughout the day, and it got very hard, and then they set up the tub. So, excuse me. So it got really pretty hard for me to handle the contractions, but then the tub was set up, and so we got into the tub real quick, and that definitely cut the pain until the very end of the labor, which again was just so, how do I describe it? It was incredibly intense to the point where I was somewhere else mentally. It was, you become a whole different being at that moment, at those moments. The last moments are just, they were very, very intense for me. But then he came, I questioned there at the end whether or not I was going to be able to do it. I mean, if I had the choice at that moment, I would have made the choice for pain medicine, but I didn't have that option at that moment, because there's nothing when you're at home. And so I definitely had the thoughts of, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be able to do this. This is just too much for me. It was very, very overwhelming, but I did. He's here, and it was amazing after he came. He didn't cry at all. They laid him in my arms. They didn't even cut the umbilical cord or anything. They just let me turn around in the tub and hold him and nurse him, and I got to spend, you know, lots of quality time with him right when he was first born, and he never even cried. That was amazing to, you know, to experience the moments after at the hospital birth where they took him away and he was screaming from across the room and there's nothing that I can do about it, compared to that to the moments after having my second son at home, you know, where he didn't even leave my skin for, I don't even know how long it was, but it was a good long time, and he got to nurse and we got to cuddle, and it just felt much more natural and much more beautiful, it's just the way that it felt like it should be. And then when I was ready, then they go ahead and cut, you know, well, Doug cut the cord, and then they, you know, clean him all up right there beside me, and, you know, weigh him or do the simple things that they do when you're at home, just to check and make sure that he's okay. And he got a 10 on his APGAR score, which is unheard of. So that was wonderful. And then of course at that moment, then you're actually in your own home, so you get to relax in your own bed and, you know, eat your own food and all of that kind of great stuff. But so I mean, from the stories you can kind of already see what I think are pros and cons about having a home birth and having a hospital birth, but I'll kind of touch on them again. So if you're having a hospital birth, it's, you know, the good things is that, you know, you have medicine there if you need it, or you have the hospital there if something happens to go wrong, then you're already at the hospital. And then the cons, you know, are quite a few for me, is that you kind of get pressured into medications that you normally would have never even thought of if you weren't at a hospital. It's just when you're at a hospital, it's just you're in a situation where you're much more likely to choose to use those things because of many reasons. One, it's just available. Two, people are suggesting it to you a lot, and including the people who love you, who are you know, your husband and people who are around you, because they see you going through pain and they just want to do something to help rescue you. So they're like, why don't you just go ahead and take the medicine? And they're just trying to, you know, help you in whatever way that they can. And so not only are you getting pressure from the doctors or the nurses, but you're also getting pressure from, you know, your family who just want you to feel better. And then there's also like this underlying feeling of, in a hospital birth, there's like this main message that you can't handle your own birth, you know. And so for some reason this feels so disarming and so disempowering as a woman, and you're in that situation, you're much more likely to choose to use these medicines. So even though, you know, I had initially didn't want to use anything during even that birth, in the moment that's an incredibly easy snap decision of yes, just give it to me. Whereas if you're at home, then there's not even that option unless you decide, okay, let's go to the hospital. Okay, another con is that you are in the hospital, of course, which is never as comfortable as your own home, and you don't get to eat the foods that you normally eat. So that was a big negative too. Having to stay in the hospital for 3 days afterwards was the worst. And then another con, of course, was that they get to take the baby. I mean, they do take the baby, and they do things, again, that I didn't even consider. I didn't know all the things that they did to the baby after I had him. And I wasn't over there to be able to say yes or no. You know, my husband was. But in that moment, it's everything's overwhelming and everything's happening so fast, and it's too hard to make those decisions in that moment. So it's much better to be at home or to be working with a midwife who's, you know, who knows what you want, because they've talked to you about all of these things prior to the delivery, and if they know that if you're serious about it, then you don't want any of these things, and they're not even going to offer, they're not even going to suggest or anything like that. So it just, you're in a much better situation the whole time to make the types of decisions that you want to make, instead of having to make a decision when you're not in your right thinking. Okay, and then some more pros for the home birth is that you get to have whoever you want around you. So that was truly a godsend because we already had Jaden, and I just couldn't imagine being without him in the hospital while I'm in labor that whole time, and what he would have thought, you know, during that time. And I know that moms do this all the time, but for me it was just such a relief to know that he could be downstairs with Granny while I'm upstairs, you know, doing this, and he can come check in on me whenever things, you know, there was only a certain amount of time that things got bad where I wouldn't want him to be up there, but in the beginning he can come up and hang out with me while, you know, we're going about doing our stuff. And one of the biggest pros to having a home birth was that the baby just has a much more gentle transition into this world, and that was amazingly apparent. I just couldn't believe that it's not normal for them to cry, or that they just don't cry if it's natural, if it happens the way that it's supposed to, and that people don't take them away and do things to them. Jory did not cry at all. He just came out and relaxed on me, and that was just so beautiful. And then he got to be in his own home. He didn't have to be in the hospital with nurses taking him away from me to do, you know, the things that they say that they have to do, give him his bath and that sort of thing. Instead of it being a nurse who does this to baby after baby after baby all day long, you know, even if you're a great nurse, I mean, I'm sure that gets repetitive, and it's not going to have the same feeling as a mommy doing it to their baby right after they had it, you know. It's just, he gets to be there with you instead of at the hospital, and that's priceless, really. I mean, even though it was insanely hard at some points to get through that delivery, it is worth it to be able to give that to my child. The first few days, to give them those kinds of days in the first few moments even out into this world, you know, you want them to be loving and to experience love and, you know, your own touch the whole time. It shouldn't be cold and sterile. And another wonderful thing about the home birth, it's just the whole main message. Like I talked a little bit about the main message of the hospital birth and how it's kind of, you know, that this is an emergency, or this is some kind of unnatural situation that a woman cannot handle on her own. The doctors need to be there to help them. And, you know, the doctors, I mean, the hospital situation, it's like they're always on the lookout, and almost like they're searching for something to be wrong with you, with the baby, with something, you know, that's going on. They always are on the lookout for something to be wrong. Whereas when you do it with a midwife and you do it at home, it's like they already have this trust to know that everything's going to go smoothly. You know, the woman's body is made to handle this. It's a very natural process. They're just there to guide and support whenever they need to. And of course, they know what to do if something should arise. But the underlying message is that, you know, this is natural and that everything's perfectly going to happen perfectly, you know. So with that kind of a message, it leaves you feeling like you are strong, you're confident, and my midwife even, you know, made it very clear to Doug that during the delivery that he didn't need to rescue me, that this was my own journey, that I was strong, I was meant and designed to do all of this, that he did not need to rescue me at all. And that's what's hard for loved ones looking on, is to not try to do something to help them, you know. They can be there to support, and he did an amazing job. Doug was truly beautiful during the whole process. He was just there to let me squeeze the crap out of his hand, or, you know, whatever it is that I needed to do, lean on him and all of that kind of stuff. But he, you know, you don't need to be rescued whenever you're in labor. It's supposed to be like that. It's supposed to be this journey that the woman has to take to, you know, get her pot of gold at the end. I hope that this message is reaching somebody out there that is, you know, will help them make the best decision that they can make for themselves, or at least to just look into things a little bit more before they just go along with what society normally does and have a hospital birth. just because that's what everyone else is doing. So there's a lot of points that I didn't bring up in here, things that you may or may not want to have at the hospital birth. And so I just encourage you to look up, you know, anything that you can. If you are facing this decision, just look up anything that you can on the subject and try to learn as much as you can about what they do at the hospital, and decide if you as you know, as the parent actually wants that or doesn't want that. Well, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, or that it was informative, and I will be back very soon with my normal health talk videos, food and workout videos, okay? I love you guys, and I will see you soon. Bye.